Could you tell the person that's listening right now what they might experience in terms of a change in their life if they really take to heart everything you're about to teach us today?
So I think the biggest thing that they're going to learn is how to stop letting technology shape you. So technology is shaping all of us, whether we like it or not. If you're using technology, it is shaping the way that you think. It is shaping the way that you perceive the world. It is shaping your sense of identity. It is shaping what you want, and all without your knowledge or consent. And so in order to turn yourself into the person that you want to be, you have to be aware of how technology is shaping you and counteract that influence. And then if you want to be that way, then go for it. But all of this is happening without our knowledge or awareness. And so that's what we really need to change.
Oh my, now I'm really in.
It's crazy. So, there are research studies on something called the attention marketplace.
Okay.
Which is people have started to realize that your thoughts and your mind are a commodity to be bought and sold. So there's research on something called neuroeconomics, which is shaping things like purchasing behavior, what you want to buy. It's not even advertising. It's gone deeper than that because we're doing brain scans and stuff like that. And so people are literally studying and competing for your attention. So all of the big platforms are fighting for your attention because the more of your attention they get, the more money they make. The problem is it doesn't matter which platform wins. The one person who always loses is you because you don't have control of your attention.
Holy cow. I want to try to just extrapolate this for somebody who maybe has never thought about the way that technology is controlling your life and shaping you and your brain and grabbing your attention. I think a lot of us are aware that there was a lot of science around the way a retail store is laid out. When you walk in, a lot of stores use fragrance. There's a lot of ways that things are displayed, all in order to get you to stay in the store longer and to get you to feel enticed to buy something. And you're going to show us today how technology, and particularly a lot of the big social media platforms, are being actively designed to shape and control the way that you think, to shape and control how much time you're spending on it, and to grab your attention because they can sell you something and make money off of the amount of time that you are mindlessly giving to these platforms.
Absolutely. And the stories are wild. One thing just pops into my head. So people don't realize. So there are allegations that there's one stock trading app that, see, it used to be that if you wanted to buy or sell a stock, you had to sell it or buy it during trading hours. Mm-hmm. But now you can buy or sell a stock 24 hours a day. And what we know about the human brain is the human brain gets fatigued the later on in the day that you go. This is why people have trouble with midnight snacking, because you run out of willpower at 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. And so now what happens is that you can buy stock at 1 in the morning when you're not thinking clearly. This is the wild thing. So there was allegations that one trading house basically had a strategy of anyone who buys a stock at 1 a.m., we're going to take the opposite side of the bet because people are not thinking clearly. And so they made so much money by just taking the opposite side of the bet of anyone who is mentally fatigued and chooses to buy stock. So there's all kinds of stuff going on that people are just not even remotely aware of about technology and how it's shaping us. And it's scary.
Dr. K, you've already mentioned this big word, neuroeconomics. One of the reasons why I was so excited that you were willing to fly here and spend some time with me today is because your work is this amazing just overlap of neuroscience and psychiatry. You also lecture at Harvard Medical School. You have a big practice. You are also looking at the effect of technology on the brain, and you have an incredible story for how you became fascinated with this and in helping us take control back. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So, I was born here in the United States. And growing up, I used to play a lot of video games. So I didn't realize this until later, but I was 1 year ahead. So I skipped a grade. Uh-huh. And when in my school and in many schools, your social status is based on your athletic ability.
Yes.
But I was like a 5-year-old competing against 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds. So I was just getting crushed. And so the only way that I could compete with my peers was like through video games. So I started playing a lot of video games, really became a problem in high school. And then I basically failed out of college. So I was on academic probation for after my freshman year for having less than a 2.0 GPA. So basically the best grade I got all semester was a C, and I got a couple D's and F's. And so my parents tried kind of everything. They tried, tough love. They tried supportive love. But they're both doctors. But even back then, I mean, today we know more, but back then games were not nearly as addictive, and I was still so addicted. And they had no idea what to do. And most parents don't know what to do. It's incredibly frustrating for them. Like they just don't know how to get the kid how to get their kid to stop. So, and then my dad finally was like, you got to go to India. And I was like, for what? And he's like, you just have to go. So I went to an ashram or monastery where I spent 3 months studying yoga and meditation. Decided at the end of that summer when I was 21 to become a monk. That ultimately, I tried to take my vows. My teachers wouldn't have me right away. So
why?
So it's really fascinating. But one of them said, I was like, I'm ready to give up my life. And he's like, what are you giving up? You have nothing worth giving up. So he said, he actually turned me down and he said, you can come back when you're 30, but you need to go back, finish your education, get a doctoral degree. And then if you still want to take your vows, you can take your vows when you're 30 years old. In the meantime, they were kind enough. So I basically visited every summer, stayed there every summer, learned like more advanced meditation techniques and things like that for about 7 years. And then after about 7 years, decided to give that up. My teachers were super wise. Met my wife. So the whole celibacy thing wasn't going to work out. Was a struggle for a little while. But then ultimately decided to become a doctor, a medical doctor. And the big irony there was that, I was pre-med, but I really didn't care about it. And then now I'd sort of decided that, okay, I was going to become a doctor. And that was actually part of my spiritual practice. So my teacher had also told me that anything that you do in the material world will be easier than what you have to do in the spiritual realm. So set a high target, and unless you can meet it, like you're going to fail spiritually. So I was like, okay, fine. So I really took that to heart. Ended up going to medical school, became a psychiatrist, and I trained at Mass General where I was faculty for a little while, and then started focusing on technology addiction. So when I was in residency, I went to some of my mentors, and these are, brilliant people, just leaders in the field of psychiatry. And I asked them like, hey, what do y'all think about tech addiction, like video game addiction? This was back in 2015. I had my first conversation. And that's when I sort of realized they were like, oh, like it seems like it's a problem, but we don't really know too much about it. That's changed a lot in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And that's when it kind of hit me that like most of the leaders of fields, right? So if you look at medicine, like the chief of psychiatry is going to be in their 50s, 60s, or 70s. And so it's no shortcoming on their part. They're amazing humans and have studied a lot, but like they just don't know what it's like to play a video game. And so I had struggled with this, started to get interested in it clinically, and then really started working with gamers. And then sort of expanded to social media and all these other challenges that people face, and really focused on combining, I had some great training and people really taught me how to understand neuroscience, a lot of clinical experience in addiction, and then combining that with spirituality. And now what I try to do is help people develop healthy relationships with technology.
Well, I think that's really interesting way to look at it, because first of all, we don't understand how much technology is taking control of our brains and our lives, and we need to understand that. And then the second piece is nobody's going to get rid of it completely. And so we got to understand how to have a healthy relationship with it. And I absolutely am going to dive deeper into more of the nuances around what to do when somebody is addicted to gaming or social media, how to talk to somebody who is, like all of those specific things. But I kind of want to stay a little bit more broad.
Sure.
Because I think it's fascinating that back in 2015, you had the insight to say tech addiction is a thing. And so I'd be curious, Dr. K, what exactly is technology, modern technology, doing to our brains?
The short answer is a lot. So here's the first thing that we have to understand. So when we look at most addictions, we tend to think about substance use disorders.
Yes.
So these are things like alcohol or opiates or marijuana. So this is a discrete biological chemical which travels to various parts of the brain and activates usually one kind of receptor. So we have the GABA receptor for alcohol, we have opioid receptors. And so it's a very targeted effect. The thing with technology is if we look at the evolution of technology, technology used to activate just one part of our brain. So originally with video games, you would activate the dopaminergic circuitry, which is what gives us pleasure. But then over time, people are adding more features to technology. Facebook used to be a way to stay in touch with people, but then with the like button, you could get some social validation. It's not just about an advanced form of like, a contact list. Now it's my identity is becoming virtual, my profession is becoming virtual, my relationships are becoming virtual. So like so many other parts of the brain are now being affected. It's basically like a whole brain effect at this point. It affects our sense of identity. It affects our sense of pleasure. It regulates our emotions. It alters our attention span. It does everything. And what people are basically discovering, what developers are discovering is that the more of the brain that I can affect, the more people will engage with me because now I'm not just activating this one circuit. Now you can use technology for everything and your whole brain can get into it. And that may sound kind of confusing, but see, people who play video games, their relationships are online. Like I had a friend that I started playing video games with when I was 15. I had never met them before, but I invited them to my wedding. And like they showed up. So this is someone who was my friend for like 13 years. And they're a real friend.
Well, I think one takeaway so far, Dr. K, that's already super helpful is that even just the reference to Facebook, when it first launched on the scene, it was a way to stay in touch with people. It was like, clearly the Facebook from college. It was a way to share pictures with people, a way to stay connected to your high school friends, to your first cousins, to your family members. And when you started to tick off all the ways that these platforms are now in our life. The like button makes it part of your identity. Do people like me? Do they not like me? The number of followers says something about you. It is a huge part of your professional life, like being on LinkedIn or on Zoom, or if you are an entrepreneur or you're like trying to launch some sort of business, it becomes a marketing platform. Everybody's on these dating apps, which are basically social media networks as well. And so our lives have slowly started to become wildly intertwined with the technology. And this is why kind of our knee-jerk response is just delete the app. Oh, just do this. Oh, just stop playing the thing. And I think the genie's already out of the bottle on this.
I think so. That's the challenge. Is that so? I think it kind of dawned on me that like technology is kind of like introducing an invasive species in a new environment, where there's no natural checks and balances, and then the species just explodes. And technology is like an invasive species for our brain. So it starts to colonize different parts of our brain. And you'll see this if you've struggled with technology or you know someone who's struggling with technology. That's just always literally where their mind goes. It's what they think about when they wake up in the morning. First thing that we do is we pull out our phone, we browse Reddit or Instagram or whatever, right? It's the last thing that we do before we go to bed. We're thinking about it. If we're in the elevator, we're doing it. If we're sitting in a cab, we're doing it. If we're on the toilet, we're doing it. So it's really invaded every corner of our life. It's really scary.
And, I think that is a very interesting point, because if you're ever standing in line at any kind of store, look around. Everybody is filling that time by looking at their phone. And so, you've focused a lot of your earlier career as a psychiatrist on gaming addiction, but this is really about how it has invaded our brains and our lives in every single way. When I look at somebody who is spending hours just filing through videos and surfing online, they look like they're numbing. Is that like a thing?
It's literally what's happening. And it's happening in both cases. So basically a lot of studies show that one of the major effects on the brain is the suppression of our amygdala and our limbic system. So these are the negative emotional circuits of the brain. So if you kind of think about like, everyone's kind of hung up on dopamine, and dopamine's there, but I think a lot of the addictive qualities are about pushing the negativity away. So when you're scrolling on your short form platform of choice, doesn't matter, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, what happens is if you're having a bad day and you start scrolling, like what happens?
You feel relaxed.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say, yeah. So sometimes it can be relaxing. That I would say is actually good. But oftentimes what it does is distract us from the negativity.
Oh.
So what happens is it is a relief from your anxiety, but I would not quite call it relaxing. It can be. Sometimes there is because I think about relaxation as a positive emotional thing,
That's
right?
true.
So what we really see is a lot of emotional numbing. And then what happens is we get stuck in this cycle because when we use technology to suppress our emotions, our brain does not process emotions. So if you really like look at it, I mean, some of this is supported in science, some of it is just my conjecture. But human beings used to have a lot of idle time in our brains. So if you look at like for the majority of evolution, we did rote tasks. We would do things like churn butter or like make rope, right? And if you think about that, like the mind is relatively free. So as I'm going throughout the day, I get worried about something, I go hunting with a buddy of mine, I miss my arrow, he hits his arrow, I feel inferior, we walk 2 hours back to camp. Over the course of that walking, my brain has time to process. Now what's happened is if you look at what goes on with our attention, we have zero idle time in the brain. And the problem is that chances are our brain has evolved to use that idle time. So we know, for example, even like with dreams, that the emotional content of dreams has to do with the emotional content of your life. And as we interfere with dreaming, as we have, these different medications that will affect our sleep stages, the restfulness that we get changes. So our brain is actually, even when you're not thinking about something, your brain is doing a ton of work. But now what we've stopped doing is giving our brains time to process information, process emotions, because we're constantly externalizing our attention. And so the more that we externalize our attention, we reduce process times, emotional processing in the brain. As we reduce emotional processing in the brain, what do we see? A rise in just about every mental illness characteristic.
Dr. K, as I'm sitting here listening to you, and I had asked you about, sort of this numbing effect that being on a short form platform or playing a video game is having on our brains. And I said, oh, well, it can be relaxing. Here's what I just realized in listening to you, that I definitely see that, I've got this like busyness throughout the day. My brain is always engaged. I'm running from one thing to the next. And scrolling on social media is a lever that I pull to turn the busyness off. But as I'm listening to you, I will be very honest, it's not relaxing. When I go outside for a walk and I don't have my phone on me, that is a very different state in my brain.
100%.
And so even calling it that I'm relaxing is me kind of succumbing to what's happening with tech addiction and the casual numbing that you're doing all day long.
All day long.
All day long.
All day long. It's beautifully said. So this is where there's a difference between numbing our negativity and relaxing, right? And that's what technology is really good at. There are some times where you're on technology and you do get some positive, right? So if I'm watching like cat videos, like I can genuinely laugh, right? So it does release dopamine. There can be some amount of relaxation. And I'm not anti-technology, by the way. I think it's just we need to understand what effect it's having so that we can compensate.
Yes.
But absolutely, this is what we see is a lot of numbing that goes on. And then what happens is people you'll notice that a lot of people who use technology have difficulty going to bed at night. Because once you stop the technology, what happens? There's a flood of mental activity. There's a flood of emotion. And then I have difficulty going to sleep. And since I'm not sleeping because my mind is running a mile a minute, what do? I pull out my phone. And once I pull out my phone, now my mind is relaxed a little bit, right? At least it's focused. It's not running in 1,000 different directions, solving 1,000 different problems that I can't actually solve right now anyway, because it's 10 p.m. at night. What am I going to do? So then I hop on my phone for half an hour and I wait till my exhaustion becomes so profound that it overcomes that emotional flooding before I go to bed.
Holy smokes. You just described every person that's listening.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Because I think we've all had that experience, and I will get a little bit later in our conversation. There's so many kind of foundational things I want to cover. I promise we will get to your recommendation for what the evening routine should look like. But I personally understand exactly what you're saying. You you shut the laptop down, you put your phone away, and there is that flooding of activity in your brain. And then it never fails. Calm yourself down by just scrolling back at your phone.
Absolutely, right? So I don't know if people are like this. I do this a lot where like even if I watch TV before bed, I will turn off the TV and then I'll pull out my phone.
Yes.
And then I'll even sometimes pull out my phone while I'm watching TV. And then it's like, well, hold on a second. What are we doing here? Like, what's the point of this? Am I trying to enjoy this show? Like, what's happening?
Well, Dr. K, what is happening? Like, what is happening in that moment? Because I do feel like there are so many of us that don't want to turn over 2 hours a night or more just to mindlessly scrolling. And, we were talking with Professor Adam Alter, who was saying that we're going to spend 20 years of our life on our phone. And when we hear that and we go, we want to stop, but what's actually happening in your mind? Is this a sign that you're addicted?
Sure. So let's define a couple of terms.
Okay.
So the first is like, what do we mean by addiction? So generally speaking, when we use the clinical term of addiction, we're talking about something that impairs your function. Okay. So when we say that someone is an alcoholic, how do I know if I have a problem? Basically, if it is causing problems in your professional life, in your personal life, social life, mental health or physical health, that's when we really think about this is an addiction. So the challenge right now is that we absolutely have things that are addicting, which have not quite reached a threshold for many people of impairment of function. So everyone struggles with addiction to their phone, but they're not quite failing out of college, or they're not, getting reprimanded at their job. They're able to have relationships. And that's what we're starting to see, is that technology is squeezing itself, because if there's actually like a really negative consequence, it's easier to stop. So there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. It's absolutely shaping our behavior and taking control away from us. And there are all kinds of like innovations that are designed to do that.
Like what?
So biometrics or Face ID. So if you look at this, like, this is really important to understand. So when I was in college, this was like early 2000s, and I was studying, I would get distracted when I was reading a textbook. And my distraction would last maybe 2 minutes. And then since I didn't have a phone at the time, that distraction only cost me 2 minutes. Then my mind wanders away and then it focuses back on the task at hand. Right now, if you get distracted, it will cost you an hour. So all you have to do is catch that impulse. If you just look at your phone and you have Face ID enabled, boom. So when you have that impulse, app developers are reducing the barrier between impulse and action. And they know that once you look at one post, you're stuck for 45 minutes. You will scroll. So now what they're trying to do is figure out, if this person has a single impulse, how can I get them to the first video? Because then we've got them hooked. The fish has taken the bait. They're on the line now. So that's where what we're seeing is that the price of an impulsive distraction is becoming way higher. So I think teenagers spend somewhere between 4 and 6 hours a day on their cell phone. It's crazy, right? And how
I would
do you
think
spend
even more, honestly.
Yeah, that's average. So how does that happen? It's because they hook you for a few minutes and then you lose an hour.
And here's a question that I think it might sound dumb, but I really mean this. How do you know if you're addicted? And I say that because, I can stand there as a parent, Dr. K, and look at my 25, 24, and 19-year-old, all of whom have their phones in their hands, all of whom are cranked down with their neck scrolling. And as I'm yelling, guys, get off your phone, I got my phone in my hand.
Absolutely. So in a weird way, I'd say it's the wrong question, because I think we get caught up in whether we're addicted or not addicted.
Okay.
How do you know?
What's the right question?
The question is, do you want to use your cell phone? Are you intentionally using technology in the way that you want to? That's the question. Right? So at the end of your day or at the end of your week, if you look back and you look at all of your technology use, are you happy with how that's working? Are you like, man, I'm so glad that I spent 2 hours and 10 minutes scrolling on TikTok at 11 p.m. on a Thursday?
No, I'm not happy.
So
I feel like a fucking loser that I'm turning all that time over to some dumbass app.
I don't care if you're addicted or not. The question is, do you want to change? Are you happy with your technology use, right? So we can answer the question, right? So if it impairs function, so if it's interfering with something, and fair enough, we'll talk about all those negative effects. So it is doing things like shortening our attention span. We're seeing a rise in the diagnosis of ADHD. We're also seeing a rise in the not diagnosis, but subclinical ADHD manifestations. So a lot of people, even if they don't have a diagnosis, they identify with having ADHD. And why is that? It's because technology does the attentional work for you. So this is where I know I'm going off on a tangent,
great.
But so when I'm reading a textbook, I have to force my mind to pay attention, which means that I'm actually strengthening this capability in the mind. So the mind, whatever you stretch and whatever you exercise is what gets better, right? So if I spend a lot of time, listening to music, my brain will actually do neuroplasticity, will get better at listening to music. So our brain requires, the more we practice focusing our attention, the better we will be at focusing. Now what happens is with things like short form content, we saw this a lot with short form content. They do all the hard work for you. Because if something doesn't hold your attention for 15 seconds, you scroll past it, right? So everyone is engineering content so that you are just like you're sitting and someone else is driving. And so you don't have to focus on your phone. You don't have to force yourself to focus. It does all the focusing for you. So what started to happen with our attention is instead of taking the stairs, we're taking the elevator all the time. So we are deconditioning our minds, and then it becomes harder to focus.
Which is why you will stand in a grocery store line, and instead of just enjoying a moment where you're not doing anything, you have to look at your phone.
Absolutely.
Because your brain is being programmed and conditioned to need attention, to need something, to need stimulation. And it's happening to you in real time. If you're sitting here and you're contemplating the question, because you just said, don't ask if you're addicted. Ask, am I satisfied and happy with the way that I'm using technology?
That's the main question.
And if the answer is no, I am not. I am giving too much time. I'm spending too much money. I do not want to feel beholden to this thing. What are some of your top habits or strategies, Dr. K, to take control of the amount of time you are spending on your phone or gaming or on social media?
Great question. So I think there's two approaches.
Okay.
So a lot of people will say just uninstall.
Yep.
Oftentimes people will have this experience where it's like, okay, I uninstalled YouTube and then I installed TikTok the next day, right? So like people will just swap out apps. So this is where what I've sort of found is that there are underlying drivers of behavior and then there are kind of environmental things.
Okay.
So let's talk about the environmental things first. The first thing that I would recommend is that you don't use your cell phone for the first, or any technology for the first hour when you wake up.
Okay.
Now, this is really important to understand.
Okay.
So what a lot of people don't realize is that you have a certain capacity for pleasure and behavioral reinforcement when you wake up in the morning. You have only a certain number of units of pleasure and behavioral reinforcement.
Got it. So if I have a cup of capacity for both pleasure and behavioral reinforcement, you're saying that when you wake up, that one cup is already full?
So our dopaminergic circuitry in the brain, in this part called the nucleus accumbens, basically this is what gives us a sense of pleasure and also reinforces our behavior. So the problem with dopamine is we wake up in the morning and our dopaminergic stores are full. So what happens is we have a reserve of dopamine. And if you want something with delayed gratification and your dopamine stores are high, you can work a lot, but then when you get the payoff, since you have a bunch of dopamine, you get a strong dopamine release, and then you feel really good. So the way that this works is like, I want y'all to think about this. So let's say I wake up first thing in the morning, and then I work for 4 hours, and then what is the reward, the subjective reward that I feel after 4 hours of work? It's really positive.
Yeah.
Then if I use technology for 4 hours, it's kind of whatever. But if I use technology for the first 4 hours of the day, and then I try to go and do work.
You're not going to.
You're not going to. And even if you finish the same amount of work, you will not experience the same level of pleasure because your dopamine has literally been depleted.
Got it.
So the way that I kind of describe this is imagine that you have a lemon that is full of juice.
Yep.
So at the very beginning, when it's full of juice, a small squeeze gets you a lot of juice. But by the end, you have to squeeze a lot to get very little juice. This is how dopamine is in our brain.
So in other words, if you tap into technology and it invades your circuitry in your brain, it literally is like squeezing most of the juice out of the lemon first thing in the morning.
First thing in the morning.
And then that means that it's also going to impact your ability to do the work or to focus or to feel joy and all those things that normally, if you did those things first, you'd feel a sense of reward and joy for.
Yes. So technology is like a hard squeeze. So if we use it first thing in the morning, we squeeze the lemon really hard and we get all the juice out. And then you have nothing left to feel good about because all of your dopamine stores have been depleted.
So is this also leading to this intense rise in what we're seeing and what so many experts have come on to talk about, which is this chronic feeling of being disconnected from yourself, this feeling of autopilot, this feeling of stress in your day-to-day life, that, you know, the fact that you are squeezing the juice from your brain first thing in the morning it leaves you with no reserves.
So all of those things are true, and each one has a separate neuroscientific mechanism.
Wow.
So let's do one at a time.
Sure.
And I'm going to try to keep it concise. I think we can do that.
Okay.
So first, let's remember with the dopamine, the issue is that if you engage in a dopaminergic activity at the beginning of the day, you don't have as much dopamine to reinforce and feel pleasure for other activities. That's like just how it works, right?
Okay.
So we're emptying our lemon at the very beginning. So then working on your resume or finishing your resume, there's nothing left. So you don't reinforce the behavior.
Gotcha.
This is what gets people so confused about why they're not motivated. And even when they move in the right direction, their brain is not getting a positive reinforcement to repeat that behavior because the brain is empty. There's no pleasure left to feel. And that's what'll happen. If you are on technology for 8 hours a day, you start working at 4 p.m., you won't feel exhilarated by 8 p.m., even if you do the same amount of work.
Well, I think this happens even if you spend 10 to 15 minutes in the morning.
Yes, that's because technology is a vice of a squeeze, right? So you get a lot of juice. You empty your lemon very quickly with technologies. Okay. Now let's talk about disconnection from the self.
Yes.
So this is fascinating. So if you look at disruptions in our sense of identity, what we know from studies on trauma is that when someone gets traumatized, there's this part of our brain called the corpus callosum, which connects our right hemisphere and our left hemisphere. And people who get traumatized will dissociate. So they will feel disconnected to themselves. What we know is that dissociation happens in part because there is a decreased connection between the right and left hemisphere. So our left brain is logical, our right brain is emotional. That's somewhat true, actually. And so what happens is we divorce our emotion from our logic. So when someone is being, let's say, like abused or something like that, they will feel emotionally numb through the whole experience. That is a defensive mechanism. So the emotions are overwhelming. So we're dispassionately, this negative thing is happening. I don't feel anything. So they feel numb. So anytime you numb your emotions, your sense of identity goes with it. So this is what's really interesting is you can look at studies of people who have gender identity difficulties and even autism spectrum. And it's been hypothesized that one of the reasons why people on the autism spectrum are much more likely to be non-binary is because they actually have less emotional connection to themselves. So our sense of self is formed by emotional experiences. So if I ask you, Mel, who are you? What would you say?
God, I don't know.
Tell me about yourself.
Well, geez, you're so smart. I'm embarrassed to get the wrong answer. Tell me about myself.
There's no
I
wrong
am a 56-year-old married woman with 3 adult kids. My favorite thing in the world to do is to empower and inspire people. I love learning. I'm a super positive person. I'm curious about how to squeeze the most juice from my life.
Great. So we can pause right there. So what I want you to pay attention to, and everyone who's listening, is the statements that you made are about your emotional experience. So you mentioned that you're married, sure, is demographic, but I would venture that your marriage is a strong emotional part of your life.
Oh, my relationship with Chris is the most important thing
right?
in my life.
So, and then you talk about curiosity, you talk about love. If we go further, we'll hear about trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
Right? So if you literally look at the way that your sense of identity is built, it's a string of emotional experiences. Like my story is failing out of college, addiction, going to India, rising in some ways to the top of my field, right? So these are all emotional experiences. So our sense of identity, literally, if you ask people, who are you? It's our emotional moments that matter. That when I went through that divorce, that made me who I am. When I survived cancer, that made me who I am. When I ordered chicken salad for the 7th day in the row, that didn't make me who I am. There's no emotion with it.
I get this. And so basically, you see as a psychiatrist and an expert in gaming addiction, and that since tech and social media makes us numb, that is an experience lacking this emotional connection, which is what you need for a sense of identity.
Absolutely. When I work with these like gamers who, I'm 26. What have you been doing with your life? Well, since I was 18, I've been sitting at home playing video games. There's one element of emotion to that, which is I'm a loser. So that becomes their identity because they have no span of emotional experiences because the technology is literally numbing them out, right? And so once you don't have that emotional experience, like think about it. Like when your life is a haze of technology use, you don't become a person.
Well, I
you
think
become
that's what most people are, honestly. Like you wake up, you sleep with your phone, you look at your phone, you commute with your phone, you sit down at work, you're on Zoom, you're on email, you're constantly staring at a screen, you look at your phone when you leave, you sit at a table with your family, and half the people I see in restaurants are staring at their phones instead of talking to the people that are sitting there with them. You're sitting down in front of the TV, you're looking at a screen, you're also looking at your phone, you go to bed with your phone. Like I feel like there's a massive, massive state of disconnection that people are feeling right now. They're not calling it that, but that's what I'm sensing profoundly in my bones.
Yes. So let's understand that, because you mentioned autopilot and identity. So now this is where autopilot comes in. So once I'm not connected with myself, what prompts my behavior? What prompts my motivation?
More numbing. Like the same thing. You're just sort of on this like,
absolutely. So that's why we become autopilot. Why do we become autopilot? Because there's no signals.
I just got something. And then on top of it, because you need some level of force or some action to be able to take a different type of action, put the phone down, get outside and go for a walk, because you have allowed technology to invade your brain and squeeze all the dopamine juice out of your brain, you don't actually have that will within you.
Absolutely.
To take the action.
Perfect. Right? So what happens is we numb ourselves to our identity. And what is it that prompts us to do something with our lives? It is our sense of identity. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a good person. I want to empower other people. I want this. Right? So we lose connection with our internal self. So then what happens is, normally what happens in a healthy identity is I have internal drivers, and that gets balanced with the outside world. The world expects this of me. This is what I want to do. There's a healthy conflict there. Now what's going on is we are numbing ourselves to the internal. There is no internal anymore, which means we become autopilot. What does autopilot mean? This means that my actions, my behaviors, my desires, my goals are actually being conditioned in my mind. I watch this kind of social media, I think I need a thigh gap. I watch this kind of thing, I need to get this kind of thing. I need to have a side hustle, right? I need to do this now. So now what happens, and then we feel like we're not in control of our lives because we have all of these goals that social media is feeding us. And then we get super confused. Should I do this, or should I do this, or should I do this? The reason you're confused is because none of it is coming from you. One day this person is telling you this thing. The next day someone is telling you this thing. Everyone's saying, get this bag today, use this supplement tomorrow. Right? This is what autopilot means, because we are not driving anymore. We are being driven.
I love you. I can feel the person listening right now. Like literally either sitting in their car, or they've put the dishes down that they've loaded, or they've stepped off the treadmill at the gym, and they're like, I don't want to do this to myself anymore. So Dr. K, now that we sort of see the implication and the fact that technology is moving faster than our brains can catch up, and it is now designed to put you in this state, because when you are in this state and you're on your phone all the time, other people are making money off of that attention. The longer that you stay on your phone, the more money people make. And when you understand this, you now have a choice about how you're going to use technology instead of being used by it.
Absolutely.
And I want to get into a couple like tactical things.
Sure.
So you just gave us all a massive wake-up call.
So I'd say there's short, medium, and like long-term interventions.
Okay, so let's talk about, what do I do right now?
Right now. So the first thing is that remove all of the things that make it easy for you to access your phone.
Like what?
So remove Face ID, remove biometrics. You have to use your little login, whatever, every single time. Make it hard for you to access.
Okay.
So what we want to do is increase the time between an impulse to use your phone and access to your phone.
Okay.
So practically what I'll also tell people is, don't carry your phone around. I know it sounds crazy, but when I go home, I set it in a different room. I don't keep it near me.
Same.
So create space.
Okay.
Second thing is no access to addicting apps on your home screen. You got to fucking go to the app section of your app, open up your whole panel of 800 apps and find it that way. Reduce access.
Okay.
So if you reduce access, there's a chance you can ride out the impulse. And what basically happens is anytime we give our brain instant gratification, it reinforces the behavior more. So you want to make it difficult for you to access. If you want to uninstall apps, go for it. So this is even stuff like you could save your logins in a browser, but don't have the native app. So if you really need to use the thing, use the web app, and it's going to be annoying and frustrating. Yes, that's the point. So make it hard to access.
Okay. And by the way, I want you to consider that it's not just you're making it hard for you to access it. I want you to really absorb what Dr. K is saying. You want to make it hard for all of the social media apps to access you.
Well said. Brilliant. I knew you were going there, and that's exactly it, right? So what we want to do is, see, these apps are not designed to have you have a healthy relationship with them. They're designed to increase your unhealthy relationship with them. So whatever game they want to play, we want to try to tug of war in the opposite direction. So first thing is remove your impulsive access to whatever the stuff is. So this is also where like I won't keep a lot of stuff on my phone. I'll keep it like logged into my desktop.
I like that idea a lot.
So here's another thing that I think will really get people insane. So I try to work minimally on my phone and try to almost never work on my phone at all. So there's a huge problem where everyone's like, okay, we're checking email on our phone. We're doing this. We're doing this. The problem is once you're in your phone, how many times do you just do work and don't do anything else?
Never.
So this creates a problem because now you have a good reason to be on your phone. But the good reason then turns into bad reason because it's easy to switch from your email to something like TikTok. So easy. So that's where like work is for work and fun is for fun, and separate those two things.
Great.
Now, a lot of people will push back and they'll say, but I need my phone for work.
Right. I'm in real estate. I'm in this. I'm in that. I'm the other thing.
If you need it, then that's a different story. But oftentimes it is convenient is different. Like you can sit your ass at your computer and check your email like 4 times a day. And like you could probably be okay there. You don't need
here's another thing you could do. If you truly have a job that you are tethered to your phone because people need to text you, email you, and call you, great. Have a work phone and don't have any social media apps on it.
Yes. You know, your spouse may be paranoid because now you've got 2 phones, but that's a separate bridge that we can get to.
Just don't put a password on it.
Yeah,
then they can look at any time they want.
So I think that's great, having a second phone. So we want to reduce our impulsive access to technology. That's kind of short term. Medium term is some of these other things, like we want to be super careful about using it an hour after we wake up and an hour before bed.
Well, let's talk about that. Dr. K, what is your morning routine that you recommend if I really want to get control of my use of technology and not allow social media and all these apps and everything on it to get access to me? What is the morning routine that you would recommend?
What I would recommend is for the first hour, just no technology. So this starts with even things like an alarm where, so I'll sometimes set an alarm, but I tend to find that my biological clock, and this comes with meditation, you just wake up when you tell your mind when to wake up and it can wake up. But if you have to start with an alarm, that's fine. So one thing I would say is like, keep your phone like at distance from you.
Yep.
And then because here's the thing, we have a lot of stuff to do, right? That we never get around to. Just do all that stuff. Take out the trash, just wake up, make your cup of coffee, and then do whatever else you need to do. So I'll meditate in the morning, for example, for about 21 minutes. So I'll do all of that kind of stuff. And then like I'll shower and I'll get ready. And an hour gets eaten up very quickly. You'll also find that like your day starts way better, right? Because you don't waste that 28 minutes and then 12 minutes on the toilet and then 5 minutes here. So just start off trying to avoid using your phone.
So neurologically speaking, or from a mental or from like a mindset standpoint, Dr. K, what will you likely experience if you take control of the first hour of your day and you do not let technology consume and enter your mind?
The enemy that you need to conquer is boredom. So boredom, this is really important to understand. A lot of people don't understand what boredom is. Boredom is your brain's way of punishing you for not giving it dopamine. So we have to understand this.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means. It punishes you for...
Yes, 100%. So let's understand this. So if I'm addicted to opiates and I don't get opiates...
I have withdrawal.
And do you know what that withdrawal feels like?
No, thank God.
So it is.
I don't wish that on anybody.
So we get hypersensitivity of our nociceptors, which is our pain receptors. So our brain and our body punish us. They say, hey, we need this stuff. I'm going to punish you as a signal to give me what I want. This is true of opiates. This is also true of calories and hydration. Hunger and thirst are negative experiences that are used to drive behavior. So our body punishes us all the time if we are not doing good things.
Okay.
Now, the problem is that this gets hijacked by things like Twinkies, where the hunger signal was evolved when we didn't have Twinkies, when we had like roots and tubers that we had to eat. And in the same way, boredom it has all kinds of healthy reasons why we have it, but now it's gotten hijacked by technology. So when our brain is craving dopamine, it will make you feel bored. And your antidote to boredom is to give it what it needs. It's like it's jonesing for this, right? It's kind of crazy. So we have to understand that boredom is not like something to be avoided. Boredom is your brain's way of taking control of you. Because then, like I'm bored. So what do?
You reach for your phone.
Absolutely, right? And then the brain is satisfied. It's like, yeah, thanks for giving me a hit of this. By the way, dumbass, you only did this for 15 minutes. And now you have this thought, I have stuff to do. So you close the phone and then your brain is like, I'm bored. I don't want to do that. Pull out the phone again. So the main thing that you have to tolerate is boredom. You don't have to conquer it. You just have to tolerate it, because eventually, if you don't give in to the thing, that signal will subside. So our brain has this principle of homeostasis where it never sends us signals forever. So even if you're hungry, right? You missed lunch. You feel hungry for a while, and then your brain acclimatizes to the signal. You stop feeling hungry for an hour or two, and then the brain reminds you again. Same thing will happen.
It's true.
So what we want to do with technology, we don't need to conquer anything. We need endurance. We need actually to lean into inaction. We don't have to be positive. We don't have to be motivated. We don't have to work on our resume. All we need to do is endurance. Just tolerate the negativity, tolerate the boredom. That's going to be your main enemy.
Okay, great. So put the phone out of reach, fill the first hour with all the kinds of things you can't get to. It'll go super fast. You will notice a boost in your mood. You'll notice that you've... What are you going to notice?
No, you're going to suffer.
You're going to suffer.
Yes. At the beginning, you will suffer. So I'll give you just a great example. So if you're listening to this right now, no cell phones in the bathroom. This is the most terrifying thing for most of the people in our community.
This is where I put it to charge at night. So I'll put it in my closet now. No cell phones in the bathroom. Why?
No, just none in the bathroom. Because what do you need your cell phone in the bathroom for?
I don't know.
It's the alleviation of boredom, right? Like
that's true.
And it's like, do you really need stimulation for the 5 minutes that you're taking a dump in the morning? Like, can you not live without 5 minutes of like, I don't know, looking at cat videos? Just like take your dump, right? Just take your dump and just leave it outside. And if you can't, you need to take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror and be like, this is insane. I can't take a dump without using my phone.
That would be a sign that you got a problem and you need to get control of your relationship with technology.
Absolutely, right? Because there's nothing to lose, right? It's not like that's a productive time. Everyone thinks
it's
these kinds of things.
Very productive. I don't know what's happening in your bowels, but it's very productive.
There's all kinds of, right? So we just let it go automatically and we stay there.
But I get your point, which is, I have a habit here when I'm at work. I leave my phone on my desk. It's not on my person.
Very good. Right.
Ever. And I've noticed my tolerance for being away from my phone is pretty big because I exercise this all the time. I don't sleep with it next to me. So that way I don't reach for it. I don't have it on my person the second that I'm done with work for the day and I'm down cooking in the kitchen.
So something beautiful. So at the beginning, it will be tough. Well said. So then something beautiful happens. So if I am craving Twinkies, and I don't eat Twinkies,
yes,
then my body will eventually be satisfied with a salad. Does that make sense?
It does, because I used to eat at McDonald's every day in high school. I freaking loved it. I love their shakes. I love dipping the fries in the chocolate shakes. I love the Big Mac. And then I don't know what happened. There wasn't a McDonald's where I went to college. And so I didn't have it. And then I stopped craving it. And I can't even think of like why I would pull into a drive-through. Like it doesn't even occur to me.
So now we get to phase 2, which is once you tolerate the boredom for a while. I don't know if you're familiar with this concept of shower thoughts, but a lot of people have very profound thoughts in the shower.
Yes.
And the question is why? The only reason is because this is the time where you are with yourself. It's the one last bastion that is protected from technology because water is damaging to technology. So it's the only time we're with ourselves. And when we are with ourselves, remember that the problem with technology is it numbs us out to ourselves. The other mechanism it uses is it literally externalizes my attention. So what my mind is thinking about is what I see, what I hear, instead of like what I feel.
There.
Yes.
Which is why the FOMO and the constant comparison is so amplified.
It's terrible.
Because technology has trained you to have an external focus. And if you're never allowing yourself to be alone with your own thoughts, alone with your own feelings, moments of boredom, idleness, stillness, to allow your mind to wander, to feel connected to yourself, of course, you're going to think all the answers are out there.
Absolutely, right? So we have a huge problem of externalizing our attention. So if I take a human being and I stick them on an island for a day, and I'm like, just like there's food and stuff, right? Like they'll be okay. Like you can experience your life on a given day, and most people's lives are not that bad, thankfully. I mean, maybe they can be. But the moment that you externalize your attention, you are not paying attention to the positive and negative signals in here, then you lose touch with yourself. So after the boredom comes something super cool. So one of the things that I strongly recommend people do is if you're feeling bored, pace. So,
what do you mean, like walk around?
Yes. So I do this all the time, where when I take a break, I will pace, I will go for walks. And then what you'll notice is that there's this like flooding of mental activity. But if you do that throughout the day, that's your brain like processing.
So I actually dare you, as you're listening to Dr. K, to do this today.
Yeah.
I dare you to put your phone in your kitchen or in your car or somewhere off your person. And I dare you to simply, literally either pace around or even better, go for a walk for 10 minutes. Yeah. And you will notice the flooding of the brain.
And yes, so there's all kinds of suppressed stuff that will come up.
Yep.
It's not going to be productive at the beginning, but then over time, you will notice that your mind will settle down and you will feel calmer. So like when we give our brain idle time, it's kind of like sorting through the mail. Like we have all this mail that's piled up that we haven't dealt with, and we keep pushing it away, keep pushing it away, keep pushing it away. So your brain needs time for it.
Another question, nighttime. What is your recommendation if, we're listening, we're like, I have to do this. I often hear people say an hour beforehand, no screens. What do you recommend, Dr. K?
Yeah, so I don't recommend screens an hour before bed as well. So I think that's good.
Okay.
So and that's where like we have to structure our environment to keep the phone away from you. So like I will keep my phone usually not within like hand distance. You can like, and that too, people like an hour can feel like a really long time, but I find that if I just don't if I don't let my phone accompany me, when I just do the things that I'm supposed to do, I'll even be on my computer. So sometimes I'll like, look at like my schedule for the next day or things like that. But I try to use my computer a lot more than my phone.
Well, there's a very different experience.
Yes.
It's like you're basically intaking versus
there's
giving
a boundary.
Your attention. Yes.
There's a boundary, right? So we don't want our phone to invade the other corners of our life. We want to have technology be where it belongs and not have it be anywhere else.
When you talk about the little voice in the back of your head, what does that even mean?
There's often a sort of running dialogue or set of opinions inside of us that are in the background to our experience of life in the present, and this can make a huge difference to how we respond to life in the present, how we think about ourselves and how we think about the world around us. So there's a lot more going on inside of us than what we're taking in at the moment.
Am I ever going to escape the stuff that happened in the past? Am I ever going to get rid of the negativity? That little voice started to already come up, but then you just said that you can take steps to have some control over this. So there is good news here. We're not just like at
Absolutely.
the whim of this, right?
No, if we pay attention to it, then we can have control over it. Like so many things in life, if we don't pay attention, we're not able to exert control. And here's the place for curiosity about, what do I think of myself? When I'm sitting quietly, what's running along in my mind? What's my self-talk like? Do I have conclusions about myself that may be, in some cases or in many cases, unfair? So things that haven't gone well in the past, am I running that forward? If the last 3 relationships didn't go well, there's a person running forward that, they'll never go well, or I'm not a person who's ever going to have that, right? These are the things that we can get into our minds that start impacting us very, very deeply that we can change if we go and look at it. So if a person says, wow, there's such negativity running in my head that I'm never going to find someone. I'm never going to find someone. And here I am trying to find someone and trying to date and to find a good partner. And I'm doing this, but all the time what's running along in me is, oh, this will never work. And maybe that links to a really bad experience a couple of years ago that is emotionally very powerful. And maybe I can acknowledge that and say it's emotionally powerful, but it's not determining anything. In fact, I don't want that running along in my head. How about I can be a good partner to someone, or I can find a better job, right? How about things that more accurately reflect me as opposed to things that can automatically be going on in our minds that are quite negative that we're unaware of. So the key here is paying attention, is curiosity and interest in ourselves and how we think of ourselves and our place in the world around us and our ability to navigate in the world around us, and looking at perhaps some of what may be negative, because negative things are stronger. They're more what's called salient, right? We have a salience bias, which means our brains pay more attention to the negative, which is part of a survival instinct, that we want to remember negative things because those memories may help us survive in the future. But then we start to weigh more heavily negative things across the board, and we can go and look at that and decide, what is really my opinion? What do I really think? As opposed to something that is a reflex inside of me that may have a great deal of influence on my decisions and the outcomes of my strivings in the world.
Well, what was interesting about what you just said is you said this kind of question, what do I really think? What that little voice is saying to you is that I think some of us are so used to hearing that negative voice that we don't realize that we could get to a point where we could think something different. You know what I mean?
Right. It's a way people talk about learned helplessness, and this has been a topic for a long, long, long time. And a lot of learned helplessness is often really that we're not paying attention to something. The number of times that in the role of a therapist, right, I've been talking to someone, or even in my own therapy, I've been on the other side of it, where either I'm inquisitive about the person, or in this case, my own therapist would be inquisitive about me and what's going on inside of me, and asking questions, and then realizing, oh, like I have this conception that is going over and over again in my head, and I'm not even aware of it. I've never actually put words to it, right? It's going on inside of my mind. That's very, very different than putting words to that. So after a number of traumas, which I write about to some degree in the book, I started to have a feeling that I'm just cursed, and things won't really go well, or if they go well in one way, they won't go well in another, right? That somehow there is like a force watching over me and making sure that things don't all go well. And that if something goes well, then negative things will happen too, because I started to have a very, very different view of myself and how I was able to or not able to, or I was at the mercy of maybe the world around me. Because when some negative things happen, especially in sequence, or even just one big thing, or sometimes a bunch of small things that we might not even be aware of, it can change how we feel inside. And then this stream of negativity was making me, for example, my mood was lower. I felt much less hopeful. I felt more beleaguered. There was more anger and frustration in me. And by putting words to that and then challenging that, do I really think that's true? Do I think that people are cursed? If I don't think that anyone else is, I don't think anyone else is cursed, right? But I am. And so maybe now I should go revisit that, right? And this is the curiosity. If we start thinking about ourselves, we can change, really, we can change everything, because we can have so much greater control over what's going on inside of us, and it can match up with what we really and truly believe, instead of running along inside of us in a negative way, and we haven't even put words to it or decided if we actually believe it or not.
The stories in your book were so helpful because it allows, or at least it allowed me to see myself in your experience and then extrapolate similar things. Could you explain, for example, just one story and how it relates to what that little voice in your head started to say in terms of like, I'm cursed. Bad things are always going to happen to me. It works out for everybody else, but not me.
I think one of the most powerful stories, at least in the way that it impacted me, was the person I wrote about, a person who had what is called called Cotard's syndrome. It's the feeling that one has already died when one is still alive. So this isn't a metaphor. They're going through, they go to the grocery store, they do all sorts of things in a normal way, but they believe that they are dead, that they have perished, but their body is still moving along in the world around them. And it's quite rare, but it's certainly not unheard of. And the gentleman that I took care of was sure that he was dead. And he thought it was funny that I would put the stethoscope up and listen to the heart of a dead man, or that I would come and spend time with him, and that it was just the same as if he were in the morgue, but that part of it hadn't happened yet. And when you look at the history of a person like that, this was a person who was very affable. He had a good sense of humor, and it was kind of fun to be around, but he had been around no people for so long. He had lived in loneliness and isolation without any real human connection. And the dialogue in his mind had gone from, say, bad to worse to almost unimaginable, to, well, I'll be okay even though I don't have anyone in my life. I don't have any friends. I don't have a partner, but I'll find one, to I won't find one, to that's not for you, to you don't get to have any people in your life. And this was running along over and over for many, many years of loneliness and isolation that got to the point of feeling so little human connection that the man was sure that he'd actually died already.
Wow.
So it's a strong, strong example, but it shows where the dialogue that we're having with ourselves, or what we're telling ourselves, can do to us over time. So if it can make us believe that we're dead, what impact can it have on a person who says, I'll never get a better job, I'll never find a partner, I'll never have a better relationship with my kids? If we can make ourselves believe that we're dead from the distress that's going on, we can do almost anything to ourselves that limits our horizons, limits our health and our happiness.
What I'm processing right now is the connection between the little voice and the kind of story that you keep telling to yourself, and how that then becomes the actions that you take or not. And so as you started to tell that story about a person who was lonely, and there's a lot of loneliness in the world right now, and the story, if you were paying attention, started to shift from I'm lonely to I'm not going to I'm always going to be like this. And if you are telling yourself that you're never going to find friends, you're not going to feel motivated to leave the house. You're
Right.
truly convincing yourself. And in a more pedestrian kind of example that we can all relate to is if you've ever fallen off the wagon with your own health and you start to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get back in shape again, or I don't have the willpower to eat healthy. All of that little voice is instrumental in you not taking the actions that would change that situation. Is that why this is so imperative that we pay attention to? One of the reasons?
Yes. I believe in 25 years of doing what I do for a living, is taking care of people and being a psychiatrist, being a therapist, I have seen over and over and over again that what we're telling ourselves in here is far more deterministic than any external factor. So someone who wants to go back to the gym and wants to be in better shape, wants to lose weight again, or whatever it is that person's trying to achieve, we could say, well, they should carve out the time for it, or they should, what gyms are close, and they should make that a priority, and how can they change their scheduling? And we can look at that in so many ways, but if what's running over and over inside is, oh, you'll never succeed, or you'll get in shape, but then you'll lose it again, and you'll just feel worse about yourself. It's so much more deterministic than the external factors, often without us being aware of the tremendous impact of what is going on inside of us. And this is where, we often carry along, I'll imagine sometimes, a person who could be living life so much better. They have everything inside of them. They have everything they need for life to be so much better. But I'll imagine it's almost as if they're dragging around the weights of the past, and they're taking them from the past and projecting them into the future. And we can all do this. And one might argue, to some extent, all of us, or at least the vast majority of us, do this to some extent, but we often do this to an extent that is actually deterministic about what happens next in our lives. And this is where repetition makes such a difference, that often if something doesn't go right, we try again, but we try again in the same way. So people will come in, just to take the relationship example. This happens a lot, and would happen a lot when I was seeing a lot of new patients all the time for many, many years. And people would come in and say, "Oh, you can't, I know you can't help me. I know I'm only here because someone thought I should go, or because I'm just desperate, but I know you can't help me." And then they would tell me about repetition. There's no way I'm going to have a good job. My last 4 jobs, and then they'll tell me about the last 4 jobs, or I'll never have a good relationship. Let me tell you about my last 5 relationships, right? And they're not, the jobs, the relationships are not different. And they're the same. It's the same thing that has happened multiple times. And I found myself saying to someone who'll tell me they'll never have a good relationship, and I cannot help them because the last 7 have been so bad. And then sometimes I'll say, if you can tell me how they've been bad in 7 different ways, then I might have to agree with you. But that's not what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me something that's 7 variations of the same thing, of the same story. And that can provide us with so much help. If you realize I haven't done something that's failed 7 times. I've done one thing that hasn't gone the way I wanted it to. Now, the fact that I've done it multiple times just tells me, hey, I need to look at that. How can I do that differently? And now we can open up a world of change because we can learn from the past. The past is good information, right? But it no longer seems as if it's fate that's projecting into our future. And this is the benefit of exploration, whether it's in therapy or it's reflecting about ourselves. It's much better done if we're writing or we're talking with someone of, hey, what's going on inside of me? And how do I understand that? But understand it so I can use it to my advantage, right? So that it's not then controlling me and making foregone conclusions to my next 15 decisions.
I am so happy you're here. We are talking about mindset. And before we jump into the science and the cool tactics that you're going to be able to apply to your life to change your mindset, I want to just remind you that this episode is part of a month-long series that we are doing here on the Mel Robbins podcast about the building blocks and the research that you need to know in order to create a better life. Here's the simple truth about your mindset. Your mind is either working for you or against you. That's what it's doing. And so by the end of today's episode, there's going to be a couple things that go down. First of all, you are going to understand that you have the power to reprogram your mind. That's right. You can take simple steps and you can practice them every day to train your mind to work for you. And I'm also going to prove to you today, using very simple science, that your mind is trying to help you. It doesn't know any better if it's working against you. And when you can identify the way that you want to feel or what you want to do with your life, you can change your mindset to help you. And when you do that, here's what's super cool. It improves the day-to-day experience of your life, and it changes what it's like to be in your head. So whether you're listening to this episode because you struggle right now with overthinking or feeling unworthy, or maybe you have a really positive outlook, but you just want to level up. You want to play a bigger game. That's where I am right now. I am so ready to take a bigger swing to knock it out of the park this year. And the mindset and creating a more powerful mindset, that is a tool in your arsenal to help you achieve anything that you want. So today, you and I are going to get serious about making your mind work for you. And I want to start us off with a question from a listener named Brandy.
Hi there, Mel. My name is Brandy. How do I stop the spiral of negative thoughts and feelings? I really want to reset and start embracing a happier life. I just don't know where to start. I hope you can help.
Brandy, I am so happy that you asked this question because we have received thousands of versions of this question. And I'm also kind of thrilled. I picked your question in particular because you use the word reset. And today I am going to teach you how to give yourself a mindset reset. And I'm going to explain what a mindset reset is, the simple steps to doing it. It's all going to make sense in a couple minutes. But I want to give you a preview so that as we step into the process of giving yourself a reset mentally, that you have a baseline understanding. So here's a preview of what we're going to talk about, okay? You have a filter in your brain, and I'm going to teach you using science and neuroscience how to use this filter that's already in your brain to your advantage. And everything that I'm going to teach you, you can put to practice immediately. And what I love so much about this conversation that we're about to have is that you may even experience an immediate change the first time you try this little thing I'm going to teach you. This is so cool because the moment you experience this small change in your mindset, it will create momentum. It creates excitement. It creates possibility. There's this opening of a whole new way of thinking. But before we can get there, I want to just start with the basics so that you feel really empowered around the topic of mindset and around reprogramming this filter in your brain. So let's just start with a definition so we're all using the same terminology. And let's define, you and I, what is a mindset? Well, your mindset is your beliefs and your opinions about the way that the world works. That's the definition when you look it up. However, you know that I prefer metaphors. Mel Robbins is dyslexic, so she likes to be able to visualize something, especially when we're talking about this intellectual stuff, okay? So the metaphor that I love when it comes to mindset and the sciencey, psychological, neurological aspect of mindset and brain programming is I use the metaphor sunglasses. I think about your mindset like a pair of sunglasses. So stop and think right now about your favorite pair of sunglasses. I have these sunglasses that I have had for almost 15 years. I bought them because we were going on this rafting trip and I had forgot to pack my sunglasses. And so I bought the only cool pair of sunglasses that they had on that turnstile thing on the counter. They were like $15. And they were these huge black bug-eyed glasses. I feel like Jackie O when I wear them. So think about your favorite pair of sunglasses for just a minute. Now I want you to think about the lens color. And think about how when you put on that pair of sunglasses, that lens on your favorite sunglasses, it colors and filters what you see and it gives it a tint, right? I mean, if you put on rose-colored sunglasses, the world has a rosy, bright tint to it. If you put on amber sunglasses, same thing. Gray, same thing. My big black bug-eyed glasses that I just love. I feel so glamorous in these $15 plastic things. Everything looks crazy dark. Just really blocks everything out. Your mindset works the same way as a pair of sunglasses. Let's go back to the written definition of your mindset. Your mindset is made up of your beliefs and your opinions. And just like the lens on a pair of sunglasses, those beliefs and opinions that you have, they create a mindset through which you filter the world. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. Let's say you're a pessimistic person. If that's your mindset, if that's your outlook, you will filter the world through pessimism, just like a dark pair of sunglasses skews the outside world with this blackened, darker shade. And if you're not pessimistic, let's just think about the most pessimistic person you know. Someone who is always negative. They could be sitting on the beach in the Bahamas with a beautiful, fabulous tropical drink in their hand. Sun is shining, crystal clear ocean, and they're annoyed because lunch hasn't come out yet. You know that kind of person. You've sat next to them at a wedding where the band is awesome, the couple is so cute and happy, families together, and what is this person doing? They're bitching about something, some relative that's sitting all the way on the other side of the room. All they notice is the one thing that's wrong or irritating them. They don't even notice all of the amazing things that are going on around them. Isn't it interesting when I describe this negative, pessimistic person? You know exactly who I'm talking about. And you're probably thinking, dear God, do not sit them next to me at the next family wedding. I do not want to hear this, okay? I do not like that kind of mindset or that mood. I do not want dark-colored glasses skewing the way that I enjoy this situation right now. And here's the craziest thing about mindset. You know that pessimistic person you and I were just thinking about? They have no idea that they have dark glasses on. This is just the way they see the world. I'm going to give you another example of mindset and how important this is. I want you to think about someone you work with, or maybe you go to school with this person, who has a can-do attitude. No matter how tight the deadline or how rude the customer is that you guys are waiting on, or how much other team members are slacking off, this one person with a can-do attitude, they always see the bright side. Or they have this unbelievable ability to just shrug off the rudeness of other people or the laziness of the students that are on your group project. And they literally can just flip it and turn to you and go, well, they probably have something going on in their personal life. It's as if they always see any situation or any relationship from the positive. They see possibility. They give people the benefit of the doubt. They assume good intent. This too is a mindset. It's just like putting on a rosy pair of sunglasses. Everything is sharper, clearer, brighter when you have this kind of mindset. Even a cloudy, crappy day looks like a beautiful sunrise. In fact, there's a really cool study from the University of Toronto about rose-colored glasses. This isn't just a saying. When you wear rose-colored glasses, your attitude is better. And there's even more based on this research. When you wear rose-colored glasses, you even see more. Your visual horizon is expanded because these rose-colored glasses put you in a good mood. Your mindset determines the way you view the world, and that determines how you think. So I want to do a gut check right now with you. If you had to tell the truth, or actually, let's make this really accurate. If your best friend had to describe the color of the sunglasses that you wear, would they say that you're more on the lane of the dark, bug-eyed plastic glasses that just skewed everything like it was midnight? Or are you more on the range of everything's rosy? You're always positive. You are always upbeat. You see beauty where most people see nothing. Do a quick gut check with yourself because your mindset is critical. It shapes the way you view the world. And that determines how and what you think about. It also determines how you feel about the present moment, about your past, and about the future. And most importantly, this is where it gets really important. Your mindset determines what actions you take and what actions you don't take. And it also impacts how you see other people. So, for example, if I asked you, so what's your mom like? Before you even answer the question, you subconsciously drop on sunglasses and it filters your opinion about her. And by having a filter about another person, it also limits what's possible for her. You think she just is that way, which means there's no room for her to change. So why is mindset and getting intentional about changing your mindset? Why is this so important? Why do you need to know what color the lens is that you view the world through? And more importantly, why it's time to pop those lenses out if they don't serve you and put in different lenses so that you can see things differently. I'll tell you why your mindset is so important. Because so much of your potential is either limited or expanded by your mindset. I prove to you almost every single episode on the Mel Robbins podcast that with the right attitude and consistent action, you can absolutely change anything about your life or your health or your relationships for the better. And if you're walking around right now with a really negative mindset, you've got those dark, bug-eyed glasses on, and you're sitting there every single day telling yourself day in and day out that there is nothing that you can do about this situation, this job, this relationship, this health condition, that you've tried, that you've failed, that you don't deserve it, that you don't know how. I want you to consider that your own mindset is keeping you stuck in that broken situation because your mindset is not inspiring you to do anything about it. Being able to spot those dark lenses, pop them out, put in something brighter, rosier, more luminous, it's going to change everything. And here's why. When you feel more hopeful, or when you see options, and you start to tell yourself, well, why not? Why don't I just try it? What if it works out? Why don't I just see what happens? I do deserve to be happier. I don't deserve to be treated like this. I should start speaking up. That rosier mindset, it inspires you to take the actions that change your life. And it's the actions that matter. This is why I love this topic about mindset and what you're about to learn about the filter in your brain so much. Because right now, there are areas in your life where your own mindset is blocking you from taking action. And before we jump into the filter in your brain and changing your mindset, I want to be very clear about something. This conversation today, it's not about positive thinking. You and I are talking about training your mind to work for you. That's very different. This is not toxic positivity. I'm not asking you to put a positive spin on a shitty situation. I'm also very clear that thinking nice thoughts, it's not going to get your bills paid. However, if you can get serious and intentional and strategic about training your mind to have a rosier and more optimistic and empowered attitude, you, my friend, will be able to say to yourself, I can do this. You will be able to say, you know what? I know my student debt is piled from the floor to the ceiling, and I have not opened those bills in approximately 10 months, but I believe in my ability to figure out how to pay this off. If you can, that is an example of how you go from I'm fucked to I can figure this out. When you take off the dark glasses, you know what you'll see? You'll see you're not stuck in the job. You're not stuck in the relationship. You're not stuck with the unhealthy habits that you have. If you're the kind of person that constantly shrugs your shoulders and is like, well, it is what it is. I got this college debt. It is what it is. I always date these losers. It is what it is. My grandfather was heavy. My mother was heavy. I guess I'll just be heavy and feel really bad about it. No. You can look at something differently. And when you look at it differently, you see different options. And I also want to say one more thing before we jump into the filter in your brain and its connection to your mindset. There are things in life that you are not going to change, or at least you're not going to change them overnight. For example, you and I cannot change that there is discrimination in this world. There is bias, and there is violence that a lot of people experience. We cannot change the fact that poverty and mental health issues impact people for real. But here's what you can do. You can train yourself to look at the future and decide how you're going to react to and respond to the things that you're facing in your life. You can decide how you're going to heal and what you're going to do about those things for yourself and your community. And one final thing. We have a huge global audience here on the Mel Robbins podcast. And I want you to know, if you're listening in another country, that I am reading all of the questions that you're submitting through the DMs and through the forums at melrobbins.com. And I see so many of you writing about your desire to create a better life and the fact that it's hard because you're living in Iran or your country is under siege like Ukraine. And I'm going to tell you something. A positive mindset is not going to change the reality of what is going on around you. Here's what it does, and this is why it's important. It empowers you to face it, to deal with it, and to survive it. That's what a mindset does. And that's why it's important to get serious about training your mind to work for you. And this connection between mindset and action, this is so important that I want to give you one more example about how your mindset either inspires action or it discourages it. So let's just say that you are in a job and you hate it. You feel stuck. You feel like you're kind of dead inside. You're not excited about anything. it's day in, day out, the same thing. Or if you're not working right now, and let's say you've taken time off to raise your kids, and you're sitting there going, I want to get back in the workforce, but I don't have any skills, and I've got a 20-year hold in my resume. If your mindset is like those dark, bug-eyed sunglasses that just muddy everything that you see, this is what you're telling yourself. Nobody's going to hire me. I don't have any experience. I don't even know how to write a resume. How the hell am I going to get into interior design when I went to college for accounting and I work in a big accounting firm and I don't even know how to begin doing this? I can't make this happen. If that is the way that you look at the future, if that's your mindset, if you color what's possible through that dark lens, if you keep telling yourself those things, you will see a world where you can't change. So are you going to feel inspired to work on your resume? Of course not. Are you going to feel empowered to start Googling and researching and figuring out how to go from an accounting job into interior design? No, because your mindset has stopped you before you even started. And that's why it's critical for you to realize this is not just a conversation about your thoughts. At the end of the day, if you don't have a positive mindset, you and I can talk about actions and habits all day long till we're blue in the face, but you won't do shit about it. I got to get you to have the kind of mindset that also says, hey, it's worth it. Hey, I can do something about this. Because if I can get you to be more optimistic, if I can get you to take the dark lens off and put on a lighter one, if I can get you to start believing it is worth it for you to apply. It is worth it for you to put your dating app back up. Yeah, it is worth it for you to pick up the pen and start working on that book you've always wanted to write. Hell yes, it's worth it for you to take 10 minutes today and lay down on the floor and do those stretching exercises that the doctor told you should do because you threw your back out instead of sitting on the couch and bitching about it. Of course it's worth it. If I can get you to start to flip from, easy for you to say, Mel, works out for you, doesn't work out for me, it's not going to help. I've had anxiety for years. If I can get you into, hey, maybe it will work. Hey, maybe I'm ready. Maybe I should try this. Maybe I do deserve this. That singular switch in your mindset motivates you, encourages you to take action. And that's critical because without action, your problems are not going away. Without action, those dreams are not coming true. Without action, you are not healing the crap that's giving you pain. When you change your mindset, it doesn't make those challenges disappear. It changes your ability to face them. And so I'm going to teach you, and I'm going to teach Brandy. Remember that question? She wants, how do I reset this, Mel? How do I stop doubting myself? Well, I'm going to teach you how to do a mindset reset because the fact is you can change your mindset. You are not stuck with the thoughts that you think. You are not stuck with the way that you feel. You can make your mind a place that supports you. Yes, you can start to see possibility where you never saw any possibility or hope before. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.